Welcome, everyone, to The Natural You. I'm your host, Tim Wood. Today, we have a returning guest, the wonderful Dr. Glenn Duffy. Glenn was on in the first series, and he's still in Marbella, now running one of the busiest practices in the whole of Europe. And I wanted to touch base with him because quite a few things have changed. And I'd love you to just share about what you've been up to since we last spoke on The Natural You, Glenn.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me back. I didn't do such a bad job first time around, I guess. So lots been going on. I think the last we spoke mostly about Carwild and our shared project in Carwild and bringing male chiropractors back into the wild. And we've continued to do, and in fact, we almost could run this whole podcast on the last one we did with the wolves. That maybe we'll save that up for another podcast. We'll leave that one as a kind of little placeholder. But in my personal life, I guess, personal and professional life, things have changed quite a lot. I guess that one of the biggest things that's changed for me is that I've started writing a lot. I've become a bit of an author. Not full time. I'm moving a little bit close to full time, but so you know a lot about this project. But about 4 years ago, I started writing a book which is called Friendly, which you'll see in the background there, which was originally set out to be about the chiropractic's ability to reconnect people to a deeper inner nature and a deeper spiritual realm. That was actually the origin of the book. Then I realized that in that sort of realm, we didn't really have many books that, in our current language, in today's language, that explained to patients or clients how chiropractic worked, how we had a natural optimal alignment, and how when that wasn't right, that it interfered with our ability to heal, but also it interfered with our ability to be at peace in our lives in general, but also like most deeply in our brain. And so I set about writing the book, and I kind of really wrote it for my patient base, for our people. And then it kind of, when we launched it, it kind of took on a bit of a life of its own. So it actually is now used by a lot of different clinics in Europe as a primary teaching tool for their patients. So when patients come into care, they get a copy of the book, either to lend or to read on reception, or some of them, in our practice, we actually gift most of our patients the book, and then a tag for the section which is most relevant to them. And in there we explain how a spine should be, so the key elements of spinal health, and then we explain how things go wrong, and we put it in a way that it's extremely relevant to today. So we explain why somebody might end up having shoulder symptoms because they've got problems in their mid-neck, for example. And then we relate it back to historic damage, and then we make it very clear what the best course of action is. So it's kind of it's ended up being used by lots of practices to actually explain to their patients and get better patient results. So that was the first book.
What's that called? What is the
Befriend Gravity? I don't know if you can see it in the background up there. And then it was actually that's also in Spanish, and it's also in Portuguese. It's also might be in German in the next year, I think. So the Germans seem to be translating it. I've got to confess, my natural kind of wish to kind of have translate into lots of languages not so high, because we don't have that many different languages in our practice. I'm very grateful if anybody wants to take on the project of translating it. It's quite a big project. So that was actually quite big because apart from anything else, it got me a little bit more onto certain chiropractic stages in Europe, explaining kind of my vision for chiropractic and how I worked. And then I kind of wrote a book by mistake, which is that we were doing these newsletter for our patients. We've got a practice which is very much based upon a long-term wellness relationship with our patients. And I started writing a newsletter about water. And I knew it was going to be a slightly longer one because there's quite a lot to talk about. And I did more and more research. And, a newsletter would usually, I thought it was going to be an article, and it ended up being a small book. So I basically took another, I think it was 6 months, during which I produced that. And it's kind of quite a tongue-in-cheek. It's over there, you see it. The Dirty Truth About Your Drinking Water, it's called. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, it's kind of parodies the ridiculous promises that our governments make that we have safe drinking water, really, and kind of challenges what the concept of safe is, and challenges what we actually really believe the purpose of water is, because most people believe that the purpose of water is just to hydrate us, but it's really, when we start to look at it as a transport system in our body, we start to look at it with a different lens. We start to want it to have transport capacity. So that book has been relatively successful in that it's sold internationally and so on, but it hasn't been a focus of mine. It was something that I needed to kind of tick the box on to get the information out there. Oh, excuse me. And then started the project, which kind of had originated out of that first book, the book which is still in my to-do list, which is Break Free, which is about the kind of greater human change through chiropractic. And it was that one of our friends and colleagues, Peter Morgan, sat with me over tapas dinner bar, actually tapas bar, and we were talking about scoliosis and my approach to scoliosis and so on. And it's been a special interest of mine for a very long time, ever since we had a rehab clinic in the UK. And over the years, I've had a more and more vitalistic view on scoliosis, and I've had a more deep understanding of the life changes in somebody with scoliosis. So we see people routinely who hit the age of 50 or 60 and kind of find out they've got a scoliosis. And they and their family have always thought they're kind of a slightly irritable, tense person. And we get them under chiropractic care. And this is not unique to scoliosis, but it's especially pronounced in scoliosis. And they become a ball of loving joy. And of course, everybody's amazed by it and so on. So there are a lot of steps in scoliosis, and most practitioners don't have very much confidence in dealing with scoliosis, and it's not taught cohesively in most places. It's taught kind of by the orthopedists, the orthopedic surgeons, and people talk about that where obviously their only tool is surgery, so that's all they talk about. Some people talk about it from a rehab perspective. Some people talk about it from a bracing perspective. But for even though there are texts, like there are old texts, like 60-year-old texts from chiropractors talking about it from a chiropractic perspective, there's virtually nothing contemporary, very little contemporary, talking about it from a genuine chiropractic perspective, talking about how if you have a scoliosis, if you get under lifelong chiropractic care and the person knows what they're doing, it'll just change your life. It'll change how things evolve. It'll change how you relate to your family. It'll change the sense of energy you've got in your body, etc., etc. So that project brought me into a state of trying to find clean time to write. And every time I had what we would normally call holiday, I would go away and I would spend a week writing, and then I would start to progress with the project. It's a big project because I've got other contributors from a couple of other countries involved as well.
So how's that coming along, Glenn?
Do you really want to know?
Well, I don't want you to leave our listeners hanging like, oh, I've got this amazing scoliosis book, but you're going to have to wait 5 years, you know?
So I planned to finish it this summer. And I actually, so that when you're producing a book, you've got like an editorial team and so on. I actually told them, when I say this summer, the summer gone, not the one coming, you tell them that they're going to need to dedicate time to it. And I actually told them that in November they would have the first draft, and we don't have a first draft. I made it more complicated for myself because a number of people...
There's a surprise.
Yeah. So a number of people commented on its scope and on where it needs to go. So originally I set out to write the book with the patient in mind. And it's really difficult. When you're writing a book, you need to kind of have somebody in mind. You're not just writing about a topic, you're writing at a particular level. So just because you understand how to analyze things in phenomenal detail doesn't mean you need to go through that. If you're explaining to a patient, you need to simplify things. And then I had it pointed out to me that the main management principles were things that actually we needed to share with the allied health professionals. And so the book is being rewritten. And because of that, I'm having a couple of other contributors from specialist areas like bracing, neurological rehab, and physical rehab, like physiotherapy, make contributions. And then so people will have a kind of more broad scope perspective on how to deal with scoliosis and know that they're not missing anything. So people have confidence they're not missing anything. So it's being rewritten for the allied health profession. And after I tell you what my current project is, I'll tell you when I'm going to finish it. But I would hope that after this February, I'll return to writing probably 2-3 days every other week. So I'm hoping to be finishing at the end of this summer. But we have other contributors involved now, so that slows things down. So
you're trying to say
I'm letting myself off the hook. So yeah. So that led us into a new phase of life, though, because actually what it did was it meant that we started trying to take more clean time off as a family where I could write. So the next big chunk of news was that we totally changed how we work in our practice. And that was driven by kind of two factors mainly. One was that we travel a lot as a family. We've always traveled a lot, and we travel without iPads or anything like that. And the kids read and so on, but we are constantly chatting and talking. A lot of our travels have been done like in a kind of 4x4 camper van throughout Europe and also into Africa. And we were heading down to the Sahara Desert, and we stopped at a dry riverbed, and I don't even know why we stopped. I think we stopped for lunch. We started plotting down the dry riverbed and kind of finding these stones and these absolutely spectacular stones and so on, and cracking some of them open. And we actually found a geode in the center of one of the stones. I was there with my son and daughter, and suddenly my son just declared to me, "This is the best day of my life. I want to do this every day." And as you know, through Caravans and so on, I've long held the belief that all human beings, but especially children, are denied ample access to nature. We call it vitamin N deficiency, vitamin nature deficiency. And so we returned from that trip. My wife and I, Farah and I, we discussed how we could make it happen that we were spending more time with the kids and more time in nature. And we made a decision to go into what's called a world schooling program. Everybody's now kind of busily Googling what a world schooling program is. I'm sure in the podcast notes you can put down a link to Farah's blog. My wife blogs about it.
We'll definitely put that in. That's called was that the World of Wow? Is that World of Wow? She's got an Instagram page, and I follow her. So yeah, so we'll put all the links in to Glenn's books and to the World Schooling,
My Instagram account.
And Farah's Instagram account.
I don't have an Instagram account. Very good. Yeah, and so we decided to take the kids out of their normal. They were super happy and doing really well in their normal educational system, but take them out and do a couple of years where they're basically we're educating them based on where they are and what we're doing in nature. So we just spent 5 weeks. We're just back from 5 weeks in Ireland, where they were on the Giant's Causeway. They were in the Ring of Kerry. They were in the peat bogs and the moss forest, and they're studying geography and they're studying maths and so on, which is kind of quite engaging, but and very demanding of us as parents. But they also did online school stuff to support it. We spent 2 months just before that in Morocco and on the coast in Morocco, where they're doing a horse riding camp, and then up in the Atlas Mountains, and then we spent 2 months before that again in Europe. Long story short, our family situation changed such that we needed to be traveling a lot. I needed to be writing in clear times. And so that concept, our family needs coincided with something that's been going on for a very long time where I practice. So as you know, I practice in Marbella, and a lot. And I mean, the majority of our patients are people who come and go from Marbella. They live there for a couple of months. They fly in, they fly out. We have a lot of people who travel to see us from all parts of Spain, but also from all parts of Europe and even North Africa. And so people are coming in, and we generated, like, maybe kind of gradually over the years, but especially in the last 5 years, a model where we did hyperintensive treatment phases with patients. So we would adjust them much more frequently than what the old style recommendations used to say. We started realizing get much better results.
So it came out of just having to do it because they were only there for a short time. So you thought, well, how can we pack in as much care as possible? And then you started getting these outcomes, which are quite surprising.
So, like, I'll give you an example. We had a patient coming from Ceuta. It's the other side. It's in Morocco. So they literally, their orthopedic surgeon in Morocco has a scoliosis and was under care with us and travels back with his wife to get intensive care with us whenever he can. He said to this lady, if you're going to get better, you have to go and see this guy in Marbella. So she organized to come over and rent a place near us and stay there and got her intensive started. And now what she does for care, she literally takes a boat from Africa and then takes a train and a bus and comes and gets adjusted a couple of times in an afternoon, and then stays somewhere, I don't know where, nearby, and then gets adjusted again a couple of times in the morning, and then leaves again. Today I adjusted people from, took a flight from Madrid, took a flight down from Madrid, gets adjusted a couple of times in the morning, then flies back. So this has become a really normal model for us.
So when you say hyperintensive and you're saying adjusted a couple of times, so let's say you work in the morning, you'll see them, you adjust them, let's say at 9 o'clock, and then what would the gap be before you adjust them again?
So the gap works best when you just go past the adjustive refractory period, which is about just over an hour, where you could theoretically adjust the same level again, although you very rarely do. You do sometimes. If you go under an hour, you've got to make sure you don't adjust in the same area again. So you remove some of the choices of what you can do. If you go 3 or 4 hours later, the reflex inhibition, we could call it, or the system's openness, the ability of the person to be in a state of a surrender and relaxation, starts to close back up again. So after the adjustment, there's a state of great openness.
So between an hour and 3 hours maybe.
Yeah,
Is
I
your
mean,
optimal window? It
it's
sounds
really
like.
an hour to an hour to an hour and a half. Like 60 to 90 minutes is
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
It gradually closes thereafter. If you see them later that day, like let's say you see somebody at 9 in the morning and 7 in the evening, much of that openness effect has changed. But in that window of openness, you can actually do things that you would otherwise not do with the patient for another 4 weeks of care. So you can, it's like a cheat. It's like a cheat. You can literally skip way ahead in care, do deeper things without having to, a lot of people will try to force and break through things that aren't ready to be changed. But if you know, this is across the board. If you know how to open somebody's system and then go deeper, then you can get much greater changes sooner without the same concepts of force and possibility and even probability of negative reactions. So some people, if people are forcing their care, you end up having people who are sore the next day or sore that same day. And so this model, you have to be super precise and you have to be thinking about what you're doing. I had some of my closest friends help me model the physiology of this and figure out how it was working. But we then kind of got to another stage of challenge where, as an example, that girl who came from Northern Africa, but she was just one example, there were many of them, just said, I want to do more. This works so well. I want to do more. I want to do this. I want to do more in a day. Can I come back in twice again later in the day? And honestly, hand on heart, my original response was, no, 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 no. And I said, okay, let's try. Let's see how we go. And it came 1 week with this girl where, so this girl had like a systemic inflammatory, autoimmune markers were positive, etc., etc. And she had swelling in all of her knuckles. And I'm adjusting her. I've got a CBP background originally, so I like very much interested in curves and things that would be driving systemic stress in the nervous system that would then be producing abnormal vagus tension and abnormal levels of inflammation. And so my point is I'm not doing any nutrition, I'm not doing any anti-inflammatory protocols or anything like that. And we did a period of 4 days where by her request, she got adjusted 4 times a day, and her hands went from being swollen like balloons, like arthritic, inflammatory arthritic, to being normal, like you're a man, in those 4 days.
So this lady requested the extra frequency. You were initially hesitant because it was like you're already doing more than would be normally seen for most people, like seem quite extreme. And now she's saying, "No, I want to double that. So instead of twice in the morning, I want to come in the afternoon and do another two." And she totally benefited from it.
And so I would love to tell you that I have it really pinned down as to who will and won't benefit from it.
Has it been like that for everyone, or are there certain sort of subcategories of people that seem to benefit?
And nearly everybody benefits. And the ones who have not, I didn't predict, which is not very helpful. But I'll tell you, for an example, we have older patients, we have patients in their 80s. So when we went through the modeling, I went through the modeling neurologically, physiologically. We looked into the other places in care worldwide where they're actually using really intensive care plans and like residential care plans. And believe it or not, a lot of that's in stroke and neurological rehabilitation where they do week-long intensives. So you start to realize that actually that fits in with what we're talking about. We're working on the nervous system. This is not a biomechanical physiological intervention. This is a neurological relearning, a resetting and relearning. And so we looked into all of that and we modeled it and we came up with some risk factors. And the risks were really these, the outliers, the people, if you've got a bell curve of the average patient, we were worried that the people who were off one end or the other. So for example, in terms of age, the youngest, like babies, that might not suit them, not being able to get the regularity of care. The oldest might not suit them getting such intensity of care. And we were wrong. I think we were totally wrong. We've got patients under care like well into their 80s who are coming, who travel down and stay. I was just adjusting a lady this morning who's traveled down from Valladolid and she's flying. That's kind of up in northern Spain. She's flying back today after getting adjusted. She's got a couple of days of intensive. She's coming back the next time that we're back in practice. And I think she's 86 and she's doing amazing well. She's like, her whole life has changed. And then we do have some other patients, like I've got a hyperkyphotic 50-year-old guy who's got quite a rigid hyperkyphosis, that when I do the double adjustments with him, his window doesn't seem to be more open at the hour and a half mark. so I'm not able to do more. Does it mean that he's not going to get the same results? He's still got amazing results. So it's not like it's not working. It just works much better with some people. And I could not have predicted who those people will be. This is something we're going to continue to work on, because it's really a matter of, we've done it through need and patient request. Patients have specifically requested it. But we've kind of all just gone with, there's so many things that this applies to. We all just graduate and we've taken these guidelines that were made up at some conference by people who've never actually worked in the field, and everyone just does them. And they've become such a norm that nobody wants to challenge them. Now, I'd love to tell you that I'm like a trailblazer and I made all this up, but like when we challenge them, we get better results with doing things that seem counterintuitive based on the current model. And so that's kind of been the huge mind change for me and for us, is that we now, when we look at something that looks implausible, if somebody wants to do it, we say, okay, we'll try it. We inform them what's normal and we try it. And certainly in terms of care model, I would never return to recommending people get an individual adjustment for my care model. I would always recommend that somebody tries to get a double adjustment. I would always recommend that somebody gets adjusted now and again in 60, 65 minutes time. I would much prefer to do that once in a week than see them on two separate days. I'd much prefer them to adjust them twice, at 10 and 11 a.m. on a Monday, than at 10 a.m. on a Monday and at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I think we get much better results.
And then you have, in some practices that, it's only like, we'll only see you twice a week, like Monday and Wednesday, or, Tuesday and Friday. So multiple days in between. So what you're suggesting is like really counter the current model, and so it's not even intensive, like you say, it's hyper intensive.
Yeah, and one of the crazy things is, we've always had good results. We've always had good results by most people's standards. Chiropractors, we're very blessed by being able to get good results most of the time. We've discussed this before. Is chiropractors we're really upset when people don't feel better and they don't feel like they're improving, and it's because it's so rare. It's so rare. Most people have significant improvements. But the thing that has struck me is that the speed and regularity of major life changes is far greater than ever I've seen it before. So we're used to having people's back pain going away, and people having more range of movement, and dizziness going away, headaches going away, all that sort of stuff. But like, we just did a review today from a patient who literally wrote down, the biggest thing, I've had years of problems with the low back, herniated discs, had loads of different care types. You started treating me, all your focus was on my neck, not my low back. And the most amazing thing is, I feel more, I had it this morning, more connected with the divine, the creator, a greater force, whatever you want to call it. And it's so we're getting, and that's not exceptional. We have mothers who are going through their intensive phase of care, and at the end of the intensive phase of care, they're like, I don't have headaches anymore. But actually, I hadn't realized that I was always frustrated, and I'm now a better mother. And then they're in tears. We're just having these amazing changes that we've always had some of, and chiropractors always have some of, but the intensity and the frequency of them, it's like, it's almost rare for us to have a patient who's not had some major life change now. So I think that people have talked about in chiropractic a lot of the years being, back to the brain, it's being about the brain, being about the brain. And I think that if we're going to do that, we need to look at what the neurological retraining patterns are. If you're going to relearn a golf stroke, you don't do it twice a week. If you're going to change something neurologically, it's much better to do it much more intensively. And I think that that's really what's happening.
But the changes at the physical level, you've got changes at the neurological and functional level, and then you've got these changes at the metaphysical level. So we're really expanding the full spectrum of chiropractic there. You've got the physical, so people can attach to the kind of physical elements, and then the neurological and functional changes, which you see, and now these the metaphysical changes. In chiropractic, we came from a place of talking about universal intelligence and innate intelligence, and so for me, this brings it in really beautifully. I think what you touch on there is really, really amazing in terms of the new pathway you're forging. But I also know that you have an amazing ability to connect at a different kind of level. I'm going to call it metaphysical, because I know we all connect at a physical level. Can you speak to a bit about that?
And which is the next phase of things that I'm not going to say I've chosen to go into, I've been called into. So I think that in order for chiropractic to be understood, we need to talk at some sort of physical level. We need to meet and match people where they are. We need to explain how their feeling could have come out of a loss of health in their spine. And then we need to show them a way to recover that health. And then in the process of recovering that health, if we can be sufficiently attuned to their needs, and I mean hyper attentive to their needs in a state of absolute connectedness and focus, and we will adjust them in a way which will open their ability to make greater spiritual and metaphysical, as you called it, change.
Just to kind of help people kind of put those words together in some kind of meaning. When you say focused and attention, what does that feel like for you? What is that, if you could talk us, what you would do when you go to a person, or how does that whole clinical encounter look like? What state are you in, and how do you get into that state?
So firstly, so very briefly, my past was I started in a very biomechanical pain-based practice. I moved through into a wellness model. I had multiple practitioners. We did lots of great things. We had lots of plans. We were thinking about things lots, and that wanting to change how somebody physically is over a period of time hasn't changed for me. I still have this concept that you're starting here and we're going to get you over here, and this is the arc we need to change. On the per visit interaction, per visit, when I engage with somebody, I have a promise to forget that anything else exists other than the moment that I'm with them and the level I'm contacting with them. So that's the most minimum undertaking I have. The state that we bring into practice radically changes what somebody can achieve, what changes somebody can achieve in your hands, I believe. So people have asked me to start teaching this, so I've been modeling this. I have kind of put this into some structure. So in Zen Buddhism, in certain martial arts, and actually in Japanese tea ceremonies, there are these concepts of shu, ha, and ri. There are 3 states of consciousness in which we can do things. The shu is the nuts and bolts, the mechanism of what we're doing. It's mechanical. We're moving this joint this amount because they've got a herniated disc at that level and we want to take the pressure off something. And we all need to be able to do that at some level. We need to be physically capable of doing that. When we move into what in that model is called ha, we move into starting to integrate that with other things. So we start to understand that, there's also muscle tension here, there's also muscle tension there. This person's overall autonomic tone, their state of fight or flight, is high, so we need to go in with a more gentle contact. All of these various different things start to come together, and we start to integrate. It's called an integrative stage. And the highest level in this model is called Ri. And in Ri, we stop needing to be conscious of what we're doing, and we move into what in Johari's window they would call like an unconscious competence, or in the Shuhari model, we would call a state of being. And so that is the state that I try to be in when I'm in practice. And when I'm in that state, I notice things like you have an ability to know things about a patient, what they've done that day, what they've done, how their life is going, other things like that, which defies logical reasoning because you've entered another state, another level of consciousness. And I know it doesn't, I have not covered it in that other book there, which is Befriend Gravity, because it's talking about the mechanics of the system, the neurology of the system. But this level is accessible to us. This level is accessible to everybody, I believe. And so my personal spiritual journey, my personal spiritual practice has given me many tools to try to be in a state on a daily basis, which will allow me to be so present with the person that I notice things that they won't have noticed themselves, and to act on that, in a very gentle and spiritual and connected way, to stop doing something to them and to do something with them. So it's a totally different relationship you enter into with the patient when you're in that state. I've been, when I say called to, I've been, different chiropractors over the years watching me practice have asked me how I get it, how I connect and how I adjust as I do, and have asked me to teach it. And over the last 6 months to a year, in the background, again with the help of some very close friends, so not in isolation, but with the help of other people who I consider to be masters, we've been analysing the people who seem to make the biggest changes in practice, seem to be the most successful practitioners, and putting together systems through which people can reliably reproduce those results. And involves practice. But that's what I will start teaching now. What date are we at? In about 2.5, 3 weeks' time, I know you're going to be there. We'll run our first course of what's called the Higher Level Academy, the Higher Level Adjusting Academy in Madrid, where we'll be doing a cervical masterclass. There'll be 3 levels of cervical masterclass. And this first level actually is going to be a shoe level. It's going to be discussing some of the nuts and bolts and how we plan to make the patient arc from where they are to the end of their phase of care, guarantee that they're going to have huge changes in their body and their life. And then the next course will be going through the ha level and then the re level as well. But every single of the courses has all of those things built into it. So the course will be based around instantly from the very first moment we start the course, we will be practicing and working on what I call our statecraft. Most of us turn up to the office and we bring in whatever's happened to us in that morning. Kind of somebody's beeped at us on the roundabout and we're listening to something on the news about some crazy politicians doing some crazy stuff, unimaginable as it is. And we bring that into the practice. And the most basic level is we obviously shouldn't be bringing that with our hands to the person's neck, So having a process through which we can go through when we arrive to the practice, before we adjust, in the moment of the contact with the patient. So, for example, if we're in contact with the patient and we notice that our attention is elsewhere, we're human, that happens all the time. And people will feel this. Patients feel this. Patients totally feel this. They might not put the words on it, but they're not feeling like they are the only thing in the world in that moment. And so having the discipline to practice the things that put us into that state of consciousness opens up the ability for us to get into what I would call the state of during our adjustive care. And that is when we get crazy results, metaphysical results. That's when we get results that defy logical reasoning.
Beautiful. Sounds truly amazing. So that's the HLA. And so that's the first one you're holding in a few weeks' time. And we'll put on the show notes. You must have a website that we can add where the next events will be happening in and around Europe. I know you're going to be There's some talk on the side that you may be presenting at some rather big seminars and stuff. So we'll wait to see that and see that presented from the stage, as well as your individual seminars. Then you've packed it in, man, as no one else probably could. So just to kind of summarize, you've written 2 and a bit books, pulled your kids out of school and now world schooling, driving around Europe and Africa, flying back to practice, practicing this new hyper intensive phases with these amazing results, and you're still married and you're still looking after your kids, and now you're going to be doing these workshops / seminars, which we're all looking forward to, and we're looking forward to your next book and the results, and as you develop your methods even more. So we'll be watching the space. So I want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your energy, your passion. Thank you for being an innovator and trying new things, and you're going to bless so many people, more than just your patients, through that. So thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much, Tim. Thank you for having me again.